Does incomprehensible input actually work when you're trying to learn a foreign language? Over the years, I've done bouts of trying to just learn from incomprehensible input, such as recently trying to read through the Harry Potter books in Polish, as because the level was too high for my ability in Polish, the majority of it's incomprehensible. And I've gotten to the third book, which means I've read the first two books, which are just out of frame there, but I've read the first two books, which are in total, I don't know, 1,000 pages or something. So I've spent a lot of time actually reading these books, as well as other things as well. I've done it in other languages. And my overall consensus when it comes to incomprehensible input is that for the most part, it kind of doesn't seem to work. And if it does, it's a really slow going thing. Obviously, when you first start out in a language and you're like brand new at everything, things are going to be incomprehensible. It's kind of hard for it not to be. Shared words may help a little bit, but for the most part, you're not going to understand what's being spoken, what's going to be written down, etc. You need to start off kind of not understanding anything, but gradually, as you start to build vocabulary and understand simple grammar points and hopefully understand sentences and things alike, you really want to start going into more comprehensible input based material, as like literally trying to do this Polish reading, for example, with the incomprehensible reading of Harry Potter books, has shown me that I've not really gained much from that time spent reading. I'm going to get these out because it'll be easier to show you. I've read through the entirety of this book, and like half of this book you can see there. So the 3 Harry Potter books I have read all the way through, or this one halfway through, and my original goal was to read through all of these books, number 5 especially, this big red one being almost 1,000 pages. I can't remember off the top of my head how many hours I've spent reading these. I think this was about 10 hours spent reading. I think this was about 12 hours reading because I followed the audiobooks. This one, so many more. The reason I was doing this was because I knew it was incomprehensible, but there are hundreds of thousands of words, and actually throughout the entire series there are just over 1 million words in Polish for me to kind of soak up and kind of try to understand and digest. When a book is so complicated, you cannot understand the majority of what's being read, and you just kind of following words on a page and you don't understand, you don't picture anything that's actually going on. It's not really all that useful in my opinion, and I really wanted to try and do this experiment to myself to kind of prove to myself for sure that I knew incomprehensible input just isn't that useful. Obviously, I know a lot of people talk about this, but like it's always a good idea to kind of do things yourself as like an experiment to make sure that you're not just believing what you hear and you want to actually do the experiment yourself. But regardless, like I enjoy looking at Polish words and reading in Polish, so it's an enjoyable experience. But when I'm spending hours upon hours doing this and looking through a book, and like it does eventually kind of lose its novelty. And I still had like 70 hours worth of reading, or maybe more than that, I think 80 or 90 hours worth of reading between these 4 books that I left. There's a lot of time that I could have spent reading these books, but I think I got my answer, to be honest. With incomprehensible reading, there's little benefit, not completely zero. For the most part, it's a big waste of time. The thing is that when you're reading a book and you look through and you see repeated words, you may see a word once and it will kind of just be in your memory. You'll see it being repeated again and again and again and again and again, and eventually you'll start to just recognize that word. And when you recognize the word, you will then start to become curious about that word, and whether while you're reading or after you've read, that word will kind of just be in your head. Maybe you'll go and look it up on Google Translate or something, and you start to try and understand that word. And if not, then you'll see those words a bunch of time in the book. You'll go to read on some other program, or you'll go to study on whatever language app that you like to use, and you'll see that word pop up. It's one of those kind of things where when you realize a word, you actually see it everywhere. That, I don't know what it's called, but that's like a thing that happens. And when you see it not only in one piece of text, such as in a book, but you see it in an app, and then you see it being spoken in a podcast or in an interview, and you see this particular word or even phrase sort of bouncing around all over the place, and it's in multiple different resources, you kind of start to become more curious about what it means, and then you start to look into it. By reading all of this, what it does is it kind of reinforces, and it makes you used to the amount of words. There'll be less words that you haven't come across because you've seen all of these hundreds of thousands of words in some kind of context while you've been reading across not just these books, for example, but across all the other books in Polish that I've read and will read in the future, all the other apps and whatever else I've done while in my time of studying Polish. And the idea is to try and come across as many words as possible so that I'm used to all the different possible letter combinations and words and whatever else, because the less that feels foreign to me, the easier the language is going to be. However, I kind of feel like this is the limit when it comes to incomprehensible input. That is, you get to understand what words look like and you get a good feeling for like words in Polish or whatever language you're reading in. You don't necessarily get much meaning from it until you start to like look into those words themselves. And when there's hundreds of thousands of words, you can't just look into every single one. You have to pick and choose which ones you think are just more interesting and which ones you are just curious about. So it's quite a slow method like that. But obviously for future planning, I wanted to try and indulge myself in as much Polish content as possible, hence the Harry Potter reading, and soaking my brain with all of these words that I've never come across before, in the hopes that in the future I will see these words again and I'll just remember that I've seen them somewhere written down, but maybe not necessarily where, but it doesn't matter because I've seen this word written down before, and then I see it again, I kind of recognize the word, but I don't know where from, so then I look into it. It's a slow going process, of course, but that's something that I wanted to do myself, and that is the only benefit I can see that comes from like incomprehensible input. If you're talking about the listening as well, which I was doing with these, I was listening to the audiobook when reading these, otherwise I would have taken a lot longer. I needed to keep up with pace, so I was listening to the audiobook alongside, which wasn't the greatest quality, I will say, and that kind of destroyed my motivation to continue as well, but I won't talk about that now. If you're listening, it really helps you to attune to the noises and the sounds of the language. If you're reading along with the audio, that really does help you to understand how words are pronounced. In a language like Polish, Polish words are phonetic. You can read any word in Polish as long as you know how the Polish phonetic system works. It's not like English or French where you have silent letters and things are just pronounced differently. Everything basically has one pronunciation. As long as you know how to pronounce it, then you know how a word should be pronounced. Whether you can actually do it with your mouth is a different story because some words are just complicated, but if you can listen to how a word is read and you can read at the same time, you start to make the connection between audible and visual connections with that word and with the language. And to that respect, yes, incomprehensible input can kind of work, but not really as good as comprehensible input. And I also would say you should probably focus more on comprehensible input anyway. If you wanted to do some incomprehensible input purely for drowning yourself in the language in terms of all the words and everything, by all means you can do that. You may get some use out of it, but you're really going to start feeling your brain being used and worked when you look into comprehensible input. That is material that you can listen to and read and understand the majority of what's being said or read. More recently, I have been looking into comprehensible input and putting a big emphasis and focus on comprehensibility. In Polish, I watch a YouTube channel called Think in Polish, and it's a YouTuber who is Polish, of course, and she basically reads at quite a decent slow level in Polish, sometimes like a medium speed, but never too fast, and she speaks very clearly so you can hear everything being pronounced properly. When I watch these videos, I think it's kind of the Polish equivalent to like Dreaming Spanish for all the Spanish learners out there. In a way similar. You watch the video and through a lot of hand gestures and just slow speaking, clear speaking, you can just understand the video. It's a very good channel for me personally, and for me at least it feels like I'm making some good progress. When I just can't be bothered to do proper studying, I just watch a video or two of comprehensible Polish, and at least then I feel my brain working. I feel the tiredness that comes from actually trying to think about things and everything just working out and understanding the meaning. And a lot of the time, although not all the time, I'm understanding the meaning without having to translate into English, which is amazing. I mean, when you start to realize how to do that in a language, that's a very key skill, I think. Once you start to like understand messages in a language without having to translate into English, that's a very good thing because you can start to do things a lot quicker. I still probably have a long way to go with that, but the point is that comprehensibility, when it's something that I'm focusing on, such as right now, not just in Polish but also in Japanese, it really helps me to feel more engaged with the language. When I'm reading Incomprehensible Input, a lot of the time I was kind of daydreaming, my mind was wandering, I was looking at words, and I was also sidetracked by the amount of words that I wanted to stop and pause at and just admire, because I mean, written Polish has a lot of really wonderfully constructed words, in my opinion. The way that there's just a lot of YZs, Ws, etc. It's just very foreign to me. Not so much now that I'm used to Polish, but obviously there's still a lot of words that I look at and I just think that's just such a beautiful word. I really like the word Jujovnica, for example. Obviously with a DZ beginning, it's just such a cool word. So there's a lot of times when reading these books that I just came across words that I had no idea what they meant, but I just found words that were just so bizarre looking for an English perspective. And yeah, so because it's incomprehensible, I wasn't even focusing on the message. I was just looking at words and kind of admiring the beauty of those words, which may in itself be useful to some degree. But I wanted to actually try and understand the meaning. I wanted to get the most out of my Polish learning, and so focusing on comprehensible input mostly through the YouTube channel Think in Polish, but I also do Easy Polish on YouTube as well. And there's also another channel which I don't know the name off the top of my head, but I'll put it up here as well, maybe somewhere on screen. It's a very popular channel in Poland, and yeah, it's just fun to watch. Slightly less comprehensible for that last channel, but basically it's a fun channel for me to watch, and I kind of comprehend things through what's happening on screen. It's such a great feeling when you finish a video, a piece of media or whatever, and you just understand the meaning and it's in a different language and there's zero English being used. You know, watching Think in Polish, and after a 10-minute video, the video ends and you're just there like, man, I understood everything that was spoken about. Everything was clear to me. I even was able to figure out words that I didn't know in my head through context and meaning. And that, I think, is such a powerful thing to do in language learning. Obviously, to do something like this, I think you do need a decent base in the language, at least to some degree, depending on what level of comprehensible input you're getting. As I say, obviously, different languages will have different channels, and some channels on YouTube will be geared towards more beginners, some will be geared towards more advanced learners, I guess. But I have found comprehensible input for at least Spanish, Polish, French, Japanese. I don't really focus much on the French side of things because the other three languages are the ones I am trying to focus on, and the Spanish being one that I'm trying to just maintain and maybe improve if I can, but mostly just maintain at this point, because my main language that I want to improve at the moment is Polish, and that's why I'm doing a lot more of comprehensible Polish on YouTube. But as I say, for Japanese, for example, comprehensible Japanese, I've been watching a channel called Japarot, which has like an animated alien, and there's only like 20 something videos on the channel, but it's so fun to like watch this. Less is comprehensible for me, it's still fun, and then after the like 4-minute clip or whatever, the channel goes over the clip that you just watched and it goes over phrases and things. And to be honest, Japanese is a lot harder of a language for me, but I'm having fun watching those videos and that's what I care about. But with my Polish, comprehensible input, it's helped me a lot at the moment. Because I decided to go into that, I decided kind of to stop with this experiment, which was to read through all of these Harry Potter books with mostly incomprehensible input. I was able to understand certain words, certain phrases, certain sentences even. I don't think I was ever able to understand fully the meaning of whole paragraphs or whole pages, whole chapters. But also when I was reading through these books, it wasn't about trying to understand the message as much. It was more just trying to read through an absurd amount of text to try and see if it would somehow help me understand more Polish. And to be honest, I want to try and focus more on Polish that would actually be more useful for me, because let's be honest, reading through this, yes, it's probably going to have some benefit understanding a lot more words, but there's going to be a lot of vocabulary in these books that are also specific to wizardry, because obviously that's the theme of Harry Potter. You know, I don't want to learn words necessarily on wizards and wands and magic spells and things like that, but it is fun at the same time for me to just browse through and have a look at these books. But it took me, as I say, a long time just to look at these few books. The time that I spent looking through these books, which I think collectively was probably about 20 hours if I had to guess, probably a little bit more than that actually, maybe more like 25 hours thinking about it. The time I spent doing that, I could have spent, I don't know, like just comprehensible input watching for 25 hours straight. For example, if I did that, I'm sure my level would be a lot better. But I just wanted to make this video to really compare the two and really give my feedback on my experiment for myself of reading a whole chunk of Incomprehensible Input. After reading however many pages are in these 3 books, I decided that it just wasn't worth my time or my effort to continue with this particular method of studying. I have also previously spent many years trying to Incomprehensible Input absorb Spanish through incomprehensible podcasts, incomprehensible TV shows and telenovas and whatever else. And many years later to now, I realised that a lot of that probably wasn't as well spent as if I was to just watch comprehensible Spanish. And so I'm doing that as well with Spanish, just to try and catch up with things, missing gaps of knowledge and stuff in the language, to try and just see if that will help me just to kind of fix up my Spanish a little bit. Obviously, all at the same time I need to improve my speech, but like also I do have issues with listening as well. Years worth of incomprehensible input with Spanish actually have led me to a certain level of knowledge, but also that has included a ton of study in the language, not so much, but a decent amount of speaking with tutors and things. I'm still at a level where I feel like I would like to be a lot better, basically, in Spanish. With Polish, incomprehensible input has led me to a point of which I believe that it's not that useful. There's some aspect to incomprehensible input which I think is useful, but when you compare it to comprehensible input, I mean, these things are outweighed, and to be honest, comprehensible input probably give you these kind of benefits that incomprehensible input gives you as well, but probably a lot more because you're actually understanding the message, and that's the main thing. And so yeah, from now on my study in Polish mostly is going to be just through video comprehensibility. Hopefully once I've finished doing some amount more comprehensible input, whether it's 1 week, 6 months, a year, whatever, eventually I can work my way into slightly harder material and other YouTube channels which are going to give me that level of hopefully the same amount of comprehensibility in however many weeks, months, days, years, whatever. So I can continue comprehensible input in Polish, but up the levels of difficulty to some other subject or some other YouTube channel or whatever it may be to fit the level that I would be at that time. So yeah, that's my current learning method for Polish. It will be the same for Spanish. I will also be doing still certain apps and things, but I think the bulk of my studying at the moment will be spent consuming media that I can actually understand and get the message from. And I think that's what you should be doing as well. If you're trying to study a language, you maybe have a base knowledge of some vocabulary, you're not quite sure how to advance, just search on YouTube for comprehensible and then whatever language you're trying to learn, and just look through channels and try and find a channel in the language you're trying to learn that kind of fits the theme that you're trying to learn, how easy it is, and also just if you enjoy the language or the channel in general. Yeah, just spend an hour or two just looking on YouTube to try and find those kind of channels that fits your needs. And if you find something like that, just indulge in it. Watch a few videos a day or watch a load in one day or whatever it may be, but just make sure you get your comprehensible input in, because it's very important into actually absorbing and acquiring a language naturally. Thank you for watching this video. I apologize, at the moment my voice is quite tired. I've been on and off sort of this weird cold chesty cough thing. I don't really know exactly what it is, but it's absolutely killed my voice, and I just hope that it was bearable through this video. Maybe you haven't even noticed, I'm not sure. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have fun learning languages. I'll catch you next week for another video. Until then, have a good day and peace out.